Now, please help me welcome Kyle and Alex. Alex Walling is the field CTO, and Alex Riordan is the senior product marketing manager at RapidAPI. Hey, gentlemen.
Hi, Jen. Thanks so much. Perfect. Thanks so much, Jen. So welcome. Thanks, everybody. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining today's talk, APIs as products, best practices for APIs to achieve your digital goals. Just as Jen introduced, my name is Kyle Riordan. I'm Senior Product Marketing Manager here at RapidAPI, and I'm joined by my colleague, Alex Walling, who will be joining the discussion in the second half of the presentation, as well as providing a demonstration for us today. So just a quick kind of context as to who we are at RapidAPI. We started over 6 years ago with our public API hub with the mission to empower developers everywhere to create transformative software applications. Since that time, we've launched our enterprise version of the RapidAPI public hub with RapidAPI Enterprise Hub, which solves the same sorts of problems that external public developers were facing within the enterprise. Today, we are used by millions of developers collaborating across tens of thousands of APIs, and we process trillions of API calls. So just a very quick look at today's agenda. We'll start off by talking about digital transformation and the reliance on APIs, how digital transformation and that reliance on APIs really necessitates a definition and productizing APIs overall, give you some guidance on resourcing and tooling, how to build a rollout plan, touch on monetization, and then go into a brief demonstration. So in terms of digital transformation and the reliance on APIs, from our point of view, really the API is a fundamental tool that allows you to execute your digital strategy. Through a productized API approach, you can bring products to market more rapidly, building with speedier development times enabled through better collaboration, accelerate innovation by forgoing that need to constantly reinvent the wheel and things that have already been built, and of course, create powerful partner ecosystems, extending the lifecycle of your products and services by embedding those services via APIs into your partner applications. But to reach these goals, there's a couple of things that really necessitate, thinking about and really productizing your APIs. And we want to touch on kind of what that actually entails. Regardless of whether you're pursuing an internal or an external API program, there's a couple of core tenets that you should adhere to that will enable kind of a productized API mindset. First and foremost is to think of developers as your target audience. Whether they're internal, partner, or third-party developers, they are in fact the customer. And this is true for both developers that are building an API, those builders or providers, as well as those that are consuming it. And keep in mind that an individual developer's role might shift depending on what they're looking to do. So with addition to that, it's important to think early about API design and experience. With the API as the product, the overall experience that you wrap around it becomes critically important. In a productized approach, this requires that your organization think about, define, and subsequently adhere to a set of design principles which will help create a more consistent experience for developers that use your API, increasing the likelihood that it'll initially be adopted, and more importantly, that they will continue to use it. And then lastly is leveraging developer feedback. And there's two key reasons that you would want to do this. For one, it's the easiest way to identify bugs and unexpected behaviors within the API. Identifying these discrepancies early can help minimize their impact, addressing the issues before that API has widespread adoption. But beyond that, addressing issues, mining developer feedback can help identify and prioritize prospective new APIs. Specific needs might be addressed through a new version or an API, or might be better suited to build a brand new API depending on the overall scope and complexity. By taking a step back and looking at all this requests and feedback on a macro level, it gives you an opportunity to really leverage the ecosystem to make more informed decisions on what level of priority a given fix, a new version, or a brand new API should receive. So next up, we want to talk about resourcing in people. So the team structure and the technologies you can deploy as part of your productized API approach. Starting with team structure, there's really three common structures that most organizations elect to deploy: single team ownership, cross-organizational, or a hybrid model. In single team ownership, the strategy, decision-making, all of the API's program's operation falls on a single team. This might be product or engineering. This allows for a great level of autonomy with all the decision-making from API technology selection, API standards, strategic direction falling into a single group, which can really expedite some of that process of decision-making and accelerate some of those processes. The drawback is that this insular approach can lead to some challenges when it gets to the rest of the organization adopting that API program. With little say-so into the decision-making of the strategic direction, this approach often runs the risk of falling into the trap of APIs being viewed strictly as technical products. The cross-organizational approach, on the other hand, takes a broad swath of constituents from across the entirety of the organization, so kind of plucking folks from multiple parts of the organization. This gets multiple people and multiple teams involved in the API program, its goals, direction, and operations, and can often open up some economies of scale when it comes to purchasing tools, such as an API hub or developer tools. But by having more teams involved, some of the program's agility can be hurt here, particularly when it comes to strategic decision-making or even vendor selection when you're assessing particular technology. This can become particularly problematic if there aren't clear roles defined into who owns what in terms of the overall API program. So then really the ideal state becomes the hybrid model, where an organization combines some components of these two approaches. Taking a hybrid approach enables an organization some level of autonomy in specific areas, like assigning product or engineering to do vendor selection for a particular API technology, while simultaneously benefiting from that collective investment in the overall program, with multiple teams being involved in its strategic direction. And then lastly, I want to just touch on choosing an API hub before I hand over to Alex. Beyond the people, really the API hub is one of the most critical components of productizing your API program. And there's a couple of things to look for. First and foremost, it needs to be able to centralize all of your APIs into a single place, regardless of the gateways, regardless of the API types. And it really needs to be able to support every type of audience and user: internal developers, partner, third party. And then to be effective, it also needs to establish some layer of governance, establishing visibility and role-based controls across all of your APIs. Most importantly, with the developer being the customer, providing a world-class experience, giving developers all the tools they need to build, publish, find, and collaborate on all your APIs with integrated tools is of critical importance. And part of that is by enabled by leveraging an open platform, which offers seamless integrations and affords developers and architecture teams the flexibility to choose the best technology which will fit their use case. So it's a very quick overview of kind of technology, people, and parameters around kind of initial program setup. Next, I'm going to hand off to Alex, who's going to walk you through launching the API program. So Alex, go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. It's really awesome to be here today to talk about APIs, rethinking these types of technology as products and what the change in strategy, tooling, and process to support that is going to look like. You did a great job introing the concept and how we're able to support this. Now let's dig into some details about how we need to support this change in thinking. So there are a few key considerations when starting to think about building this rollout plan. The first is, as Kyle mentioned, is really aligning on the hub and technology that you're going to use to support this new methodology and new strategy for how you're going to deliver your APIs. Keeping in mind that this needs to be a single source of truth for all of your developers, regardless of the type of API being used, other tools that surround your API strategy. So things like your CI/CD pipeline, your maybe design tooling, your testing tooling, all needs to be able to work seamlessly with this API hub. Next up is looking at the initial set of APIs that you actually want to start your rollout with. And why we look at selecting an initial set of APIs is because it's important to focus in and really make sure that you're limiting the variables and parameters that you can use to test and iterate this strategy on. So start with a smaller subset so you can really track the metrics of success. And based on this initial subset, you'll then start to outline your customer and user journeys, which are going to be foundational to how you actually roll this out. How do you get it in front of your customers and end users who are going to start to consume these API products? And throughout all of this, you'll be developing and iterating the value, direction, and strategy that you ultimately want to communicate to your developers. And so with the shift to more of a product-driven, APIs as product-driven approach, you're going to start to see some common trends from other web applications or other products that you may have developed and delivered. So looking at this as far as stages and rollout phases based on the audience, objectives, goals, and metrics that you want to track success against. So looking at an early access, which is going to be for private internal developers, starting to test and iterate this functionality, identifying bugs, functionality gaps, and use cases that your users might use later on in the cycle. Next up, we have the preview stage. This is still private, but you'll start to expose it out to other trusted partners. So think of this as kind of a small focus group of 5 to 10 trusted individuals who are going to scale up the testing of performance, continue to identify bugs, figure out those user stories and functional requirements. Then we roll into beta, where you might start to expose this out to a small subset once again, but of broader early adopters, where you're going to start testing the market assumptions you have and really identify, is this API solving a need for my consumers in an external setting? You'll continue to test and validate scale and performance of your API and validate the documentation, education, and enablement surrounding the API as well. And once you've rolled through these three, then you look at fully releasing it out to GA, which is where you open it up to the widespread adoption. All users, all APIs who want to start using these, they can actually get started. This is where you take a land grab of the market, start to scale up your user base, and ultimately potentially drive revenue for this API if that's an objective. And when we look at APIs, monetization and revenue is often an objective. So we wanted to look at what are some common monetization models that we've looked at RapidAPI. The first and most obvious perhaps is free. There's no financial transaction. You can start rolling these out to developers, get feedback, understand how they're using the API. Really, this is a great area to start learning and getting feedback, identifying bugs for your API. Next up is paid. This is where we start to make the money, and this could be a directly attributed revenue to the API. So something like a pay per use, a freemium, paying per a certain object that can be interfaced with on the API. Think of this as kind of a SaaS solution for APIs. And then the third and final is perhaps an indirect revenue model. So if you have another SaaS platform and that's driving the revenue, but you want to offer a platform API to better interface with the platform, drive adoption and stickiness because other tools are starting to be integrated to your SaaS platform, that's a great example of an indirect monetization model. So we just looked at monetization and how we look at starting to drive traction for these APIs. but I really want to bring it back to the broader strategy of an API program. And really, a strong API program needs to not only address the needs of your external developers starting to drive revenue and monetizing these services you're building, but also keep in mind your internal developers who are as important, if not more important, because they're delivering your software, your services, and helping drive your company's innovation and strategy forward. So it's really important to make sure that you don't over rotate and only focus on this external API program, but keep in mind your internal developers as well. So I'm going to go ahead and shift over to a bit of a demo for how we look at this at RapidAPI. And this is where we come into the API Hub, which is your central operating platform to drive a great developer experience for all of your APIs internally. So in this use case, in this example, you could imagine a large bank that has hundreds or thousands of APIs spread across multiple different teams, gateway vendors, hosted in different locations across different stages. And with this API Hub, you're able to centralize all of that and provide a best-in-class developer experience to find, consume, and utilize these APIs. So on the homepage, you might offer kind of a curated selection of some top APIs, some trending APIs, specific workflows or types of services that are commonly used from your developers. But let's say, for example, this developer doesn't find what they need and they want to start looking for some email APIs. So they can search through that and identify, based on the search capability, what are some APIs that might meet my needs. Coming down here, I can look through the API listing and start to understand where is it, what type of API, is it REST, SOAP, GraphQL, what endpoints and functions might I have available at my disposal. And if it seems like it's going to meet my needs, that's where I can hop into this API listing and start to get started with connecting to it. Here at RapidAPI, we use a term called time to 200, which is really how fast can a developer go from, hey, I need an API in my application, to I have an API successfully working and returning a 200 status code. And all of this functionality is really driving the least amount of friction to getting to that time to 200. So being able to explore through the documentation with the relevant versions, API endpoints and groupings, being able to explore the endpoints and documentation right down the middle, seeing some sample code snippets for how I can get started with this API, as well as example responses for this API. But what's great about RapidAPI is we can also test this in the browser. So maybe being able to update the parameter here, test it right in the browser and see a real live working response. Again, that time to 200 or time to successful status code. But of course, there's always going to be additional documentation surrounding an API, things like the About page where additional GitHub repos or blog posts can be added about an API, adding additional markdown for any content that might be about the authentication flow or release notes, being able to link some additional tutorials. Maybe it's about advanced use cases or some getting started guides. And then finally, looking at our discussions page. So this is really where we can drive a community and collaboration around these APIs. So that just gives you a very quick demo into the consumer experience of what an API hub might look like. There's obviously a lot more functionality surrounding roles and permissions, how we think about organizing large Fortune 500 organizations, the analytics surrounding an API. But I just wanted to give a quick intro for how you can work with your API products and deliver a great user experience around those APIs. So with that, I believe we're right at time and can pass it back over to Q&A. Hopefully we've got some great questions in the chat.
Thank you, both of you, and great job teaching us about the different types of APIs and how to get one started. Now, quick question that comes to mind is, which team structure would you suggest for, I would say for both like a large company that has multiple teams, in the fact that they're just barely getting into the world of APIs, in my head, I'm thinking like grocery stores, and or would it be different for a small startup and I'll say a coffee shop or something like that?
Sure. Yeah, I think you hit the nail right on the head, right? In an ideal world, we certainly recommend that hybrid structure, which takes a little bit of advantage of, single team ownership of things like evaluating a particular technology, but kind of brings in that broader swath of constituents from across the organization, to really inform the overall strategic direction and make sure it's in alignment with kind of the broader business goals. For a small organization, less than 50 people or so, like that's probably not necessary, right? It can probably be owned by a singular team just as a course of scale. So one of the considerations is certainly the size of your organization and just how tightly integrated you expect the API technologies to be with the broader business initiatives.
Yeah, and I think there's also this piece of maturity of the API strategy as well. So it's not necessarily always just about size, but how comfortable are your developers going to be in more of that federated model, spreading out ownership to the different teams? If there's less comfortability, less tooling to support that type of a methodology, maybe that's when you get a little bit into kind of a single team to establish a center of excellence or more governance across the entire organization. There's a lot of variables that we look at in what recommended strategy we would recommend to the team.
Thank you. And to that point, and I believe you went through this a bit during the presentation, of what do you see companies struggling with trying to figure out what model? Because going to like people that made our developers would know about the APIs in general, yet people above them may not comprehend which model would be best, a free model, a paid model.
Absolutely. I think we look at it in this iterative approach, as we do with most things, honestly, is the first and most important thing is to really centralize your assets, understand what's out there, what could be monetized, what can we deliver to external partners. We've been talking to a lot of CIOs recently, and you wouldn't believe how many CIOs don't know how many APIs are at large organizations. They're being tracked through spreadsheets, or
Oh
they
gosh.
don't have any visibility. So it's quite an interesting feat to your mind goes to, okay, yeah, I want to monetize these assets, but oftentimes they don't even know what assets they have. So starting just with that consolidation effort, honestly getting a catalog of APIs, and then the next step, kind of a V2, would be, okay, here's the APIs, here's what they do. Now we can start thinking about how we actually manage these better and develop possibly a revenue model on top of it.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, this is really where that go-to-market motion that Alex outlined becomes really important and really useful, because just as you wouldn't like completely build a brand new software application from scratch, roll it out to market, and it's like, okay, well, we didn't test if our market, which in the case of APIs would be developers, are actually interested in this. We didn't test like the functionality to see like, do we have clear gaps that we're missing in terms of things that we need to make that attractive. Taking that same approach allows you to, in the early stages, offer it for free, right? Because you are looking to get that broader user base, get that greater level of insights. And then as the product matures, as the API matures to a point that's, perhaps GA ready, then make that assessment of, okay, is this something that has realistic kind of market implications? Do we have enough broad base of adoption that people are going to want to pay for this? And kind of vetting that out during that go-to-market motion can really benefit, the initial adoption as well as kind of sustained success for the API.
Awesome. Thank you both for working on explaining our Q&As. And once again, Kyle and Alex, thank you for your presentation and just a lot of good knowledge there. Thank you.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Jen.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody.